there is ongoing competition between the maneuver and the ATGM, RPG, or other trait that should stop the maneuver. The APS system change this competition and give us the abilities to accomplish the mission.
What we see today is that active protection system is not just about survivability, but it's about mission enabling. It really enables warfighters to continue and do their work.
Welcome to the 5th episode in our Design for Advantage podcast series with Rafael. In previous episodes, we've explored how technologies such as long-range precision strike, directed energy, and loitering systems are reshaping the modern battlefield. Today, we're focusing on survivability and what it means for armed forces facing increasingly complex, fast-evolving threats. From loitering munitions and top attack drones to advancements in kinetic energy projectiles and munitions, today's threats are outpacing yesterday's armour, and that's where active protection systems come in. I'm Tony Skinner, Creative Director at Shephard Group, and I'm joined by Gideon Weiss, Rafael's VP of Business Development and Marketing, and Col B, a retired IDF commander and operational user of the Trophy APS, now leading business development for the risk system at Rafael. Gentlemen, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome, Tony. Thanks. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Tony. Happy to be here with you.
So first of all, let's set the scene. How is the definition of survivability changing on the modern battlefield, and why is active protection now a baseline for any ground maneuver?
So when we look at the last 2 years, from Ukraine to everything that's going on in the Middle East, and also in how customers and users are looking at the battlefield and what they want to be prepared to do in the battlefield, it is obvious that armored vehicles and tanks need not just to be survivable and more survivable, but need to be more capable in everything that they need to do on the battlefield. The threats have evolved such that it's not only rocket-propelled grenades, the RPGs, and the anti-tank missiles guided, so the ATGMs, but it's also the drones that could drop just very simple grenades from top, or even UAVs, unmanned vehicles that could fly and just dive down on a tank or on a vehicle and cause a lot of damage. And so the very essence of protecting a tank can no longer be perceived as just the armor or even the reactive armor, but an active protection system is now required. So we do see the results of not having an active protection system mainly in the Ukrainian front, both on the Russian side as well as on the Ukrainian side. But we also see that coming up as a real requirement from users and governments that understand what it means to send their forces downrange to fight and be able to protect them. But I think one thing that I want to highlight is that survivability is just one part of the equation. Once a tank or an armored vehicle has been under fire and has survived that attack, they now continue to maneuver. They now continue with their mission. And so what we see today is that active protection system is not just about survivability, but it's about mission enabling. It really enables warfighters to continue and do their work. I think maybe Col B can talk about what that means in the battlefield, how it looks like from within a tank or from within an armored vehicle.
So, Gideon, Tony, thank you for raising this opportunity to me to share with you. I will go a bit further in the history, and I want to talk about two facts of the maneuver in the history. The first very strong fact in the maneuver history, the history teach us that if you want to win the battles, you need to stack the flag on the tip of the hill or on the center of the town or the big city. So the maneuver, it's super important. Secondly, we learned from the history that there is ongoing competition between the maneuver and the ATGM, RPG, or other trait that should stop the maneuver. Ongoing competition. And in my opinion, as an end user of the APS system, the trophy system, and the trophy change this competition between the APS and the rockets and give much more capability to the unit that should maneuver. The trophy or the APS give us the abilities to accomplish the mission. This is the main difference. If you compare it to Europe and compare it to Gaza and the APS, the abilities that the APS, the trophy, give to our tanks and infantry fighting vehicle make a big change.
I guess I'm curious around how much of that message is filtering through to armies across Europe, particularly in light of what's happening in Ukraine, what's happened in Gaza. What kind of operational needs are you hearing from, your NATO partners and others? Are they seeking solutions to that problem you've outlined?
I think there are two words to describe that. It's availability and integration capability. And we see that across the customers, various types of customers. They want to see how they can continue to utilize their armored vehicles and tanks and not change too much in them so that they can utilize the fleets that they have, but also buy new tanks or new armored vehicles with these capabilities. So the trend now is to have the work done by the OEMs of those vehicles. And I think there's a great story to tell about how KNDS, who have now launched their new vehicles, the new tanks, the new Leopard tanks, and the new artillery gun, have shown that in that tank, when it comes out of production, it already has the provisions for the active protection system. And therefore, once the tank is already there, the integration is already done by the OEM, then the user can decide when and how they'll buy the active protection system and from whom. It's the same case with the Merkava tank in Israel, the Abrams tanks in the US, the K2 tank in Korea. So this has now become a trend, and we believe that this trend would go further.
Tony, yesterday we've been a part of a ceremony in Germany that show the first Leopard tank in Germany, and we send a delegation and many generals and many countries from Europe been with us in the same meeting room. I think we're proud that our technology, the trophy technology, are taking a part in the main tank that's going to be served in Europe on many countries. And a lot of clients during this kind of 2 days asking some question, and they were very happy that we gave them the ability and the capability to use the APS system on Europe soil, on the Leopard, and some other vehicle that they are going to fight.
So I wanted to, I guess, bring things back a little bit and for the benefit of myself probably mainly, but also for some listeners to look at things sort of nice and simply. But, what difference does an APS system make for commanders and crew?
First of all, I think the biggest change that it gave to commander is self-confidence. It became so important to commanders that you can see much more special maneuver than you see it, or in some wars that fought without the APS. If you keep moving, you break the enemy lines, and it's give you the ability break the ambush and start maneuver to your aim missions.
Tony, I think it's the great story from the battlefield that highlights the very advanced capability that this type of system provides. And it's highlighted especially because it's now already been tested. It's now been utilized in combat. But to think about how we got to there, it was years and years of development, both in the side of the sensing to understand how to detect and track an incoming threat, how to automatically calculate the point of interception, and then to develop the right type of countermeasures to be able to do that. And then, of course, countless thousands of shots of different types of threats that needed to be done for the system to get to the maturity that it's at over so many years for the system to understand well and be able to discriminate between a threatening incoming or a non-threatening incoming, and where and how to provide and to do the automatic calculation of an interception. The maturity of the system is exactly there with all of these thousands of testing, and I think that is something that everybody needs to pay attention to. But the way this is done today is by connecting the active protection system to the network of communication and situational awareness that resides between the tanks, so that when one tank is being caught under fire and it is now survived by the active protection system, the rest of the tanks around that particular tank know exactly where the threat came from. They can retaliate, they can maneuver around it, they can break the enemy lines, as Col B said. And now that technology creates that operational capability. So that's the beauty of that. And that's where the two things connect.
And Tony, even more capabilities that Gidi mentioned. Injured soldier. There is an issue at the company commander or battalion commander. If you have some injured soldier, you need to get them out of the battlefield as soon as possible. If you want to bring a vehicle to the position of the injured soldier, it's in the front line. You need a vehicle that can survive in this kind of scenario. And the only vehicle that can survive, it's a vehicle with a trophy, and we use it. And this is how we solve the life and supply and some other capabilities that you can do it with the infantry fighting vehicle.
I mean, that's really good detail. And I guess we're now talking specifically around the trophy system and how the evolution of that system in particular. But I'm sort of curious around the origin story. How did the system evolve from concept to fielded capability and to what we see today as that technology?
Well, I think the more interesting part of the story is not how the system developed in technology itself. And naturally, the system needs to have the principle of operation. The system needs to have a set of sensors to be able to detect and track the incoming threats. It has to have a computing system, automated computing system, to calculate the trajectories and calculate whether or not it needs to be intercepted. And then if the interceptor needs to happen, then to work with the countermeasure to calculate and time the interception itself. But that in on its own is a process that developed the principle of operation. But I think the more interesting part of the evolution of the system has been in the last decade, and more so in the last 5 years, where once the IDF started to share its operational insights from the tank evolution and involvement in the battlefield with our allies, with the Americans, with the Brits, with the Germans, even with the Koreans and the other European nations, they understood what it means to fight with an active protection system. And that was the precipice of the next generation of evolution, where on the one hand, we were able to continue to evolve the system and improve the system and its performance. But what was more important was the fact that it became a standard in these tanks. A Leopard tank, a K2 tank, the Abrams tanks, and other APCs, including the Boxer, right? Look at a lighter vehicle like the armored vehicle like the Boxer or the Piranha that also need this kind of protection. The manufacturers of these tanks, of these vehicles, are now cognizant of it. They made the investments to be able to get these tanks out of production line. And I think that is a more interesting part of the evolution of the system. Now that it's becoming European, the system itself has been transferred to European lands. So now European nations can buy these systems from Europe, not from us. And that technology transfer, I think, is a huge difference and it is the biggest change that we see in the evolution of the system today.
Absolutely, Tony. It's become a standard, but I want to add another thing. Usually, the tanks have the heaviest armor, and the first time that the trophy was in the IDF, it's on main battle tanks. And as Gidi mentioned, on the Leopard and the K2. But today, I think the biggest change going to be in the infantry in the world, because the infantry usually use taxis to get the infantry from point A to B. 200 years ago, it was on the horses, and then on the wheels, and then on tracks. But today, Boxer, Piranha, the Namur, if you have APS, if you have trophy, you can fight infantry and armor in the same pace. If you see convoy in Ukraine or in Russia, it's all the time main battle tanks, and then the infantry coming with buses and with a light vehicle. No more. If you want to win, you need to fight in the combat team. Everybody should be in the safe survivability quality, and the trophy gives. I'm from the infantry and special forces. The DNA of the infantry, get out of the vehicle and go by foot and run. Today, they like the vehicle because the vehicle gives them the ability to fight near the tank.
So what's next for active protection? I mean, at a high level, what can you tell us around the art of the possible here? Obviously, without necessarily, going into anything classified.
Yes. So leaving the classified out, I think there are two main things that we can talk about in terms of how the roadmap, the technological and operational capability roadmap would look like. Number one is to utilize the existing capabilities of these systems to be able to cover against the little drones that could drop things above you, or against UAVs that could dive in from above, and in many cases may not be considered as threat by other active protection systems. So utilizing the existing is one thing, and making sure that the tank has the full coverage that it needs, not only against rocket-propelled grenades and anti-tank guided missiles, but also from UAVs and from drones that are coming from above. But there's also a way to think about how to make the countermeasure more robust against what could be possible evolvement of more dynamic or more faster threats that could be seen in the battlefield. So there is already a conversation about how to combine existing capabilities, maybe drone capabilities, but also other types of countermeasures that we can put on the active protection system itself, that they will be able to provide higher robustness for what would be perceived as evolving threats that could be met in the future battlefield, not just what we have today. And that is something that I cannot elaborate here on, but it is certainly in the process and being very well thought out of, not only by our engineers, but also through our dialogue with the users community.
Tony, it's funny to see a picture from Ukraine that they cover the vehicle with some kind of screen and sheets and balcony. We call it balcony, just to stop all the top attack, high angle attack. If you have the trophy, and the trophy have the capability to fight against this kind of new trait, you don't need to cover your vehicle. It's exactly like Gidi mentioned.
I just wanted to sort of talk about headlines. What are the takeaway figures here? What should our listeners remember from the conversation, particularly, I guess, around, why trophy is so relevant today?
Well, I think it's very simple. Active protection system is available, and it's becoming a standard in tank manufacturers and in armored vehicle manufacturers' minds. That's number one. Number two is that it is almost unfathomable to think for governments, for commanders to send their troops to the battlefield without an active protection system. Just looking at lessons learned from the battlefields in Europe and in the Middle East, the ominous threats that could come from the different types of the battlefields in the vastness of both the Middle East as well as in Europe. And certainly when armies are preparing to be able to cope with these ominous threats, they need to think about not just the survivability, but what their armies can do in the battlefield and how they can continue to maneuver and to function in the battlefield. And I think Colonel B's comment about the self-confidence of the commanders and of the soldiers in the tanks, in the battlefield, is the most important thing. So if you don't provide that capability, you're going to lose a lot of forces, but you're also going to diminish their will to fight and their will to perform their mission. So these are the two main takeaways that I think need to be in everyone's minds. And I think the last thing in terms of availability is the fact that it's now available in many countries. So it's available in America, it's available in Korea, it's available in Europe by the partnerships and by the technology transfer that has been done already.
So my takeaway from my experience, it's again the self-confidence of the commander, and the trophy. It's not only active protection system; it's an offensive system. You have situation awareness around your vehicle. The system are connected to the BMS. All the company and the battalion see a better picture of the battlefield. If one vehicle get heated, the second vehicle can kill the enemy. You become much more offensive and aggressive unit. And this is the way to win a war. And secondly, we produce this, the trophy, as Gidi mentioned, in United States, in Europe, in the Far East. And we are willing to work with any country to bring this capability that if they're thinking about winning the war, we can give them this kind of ability.
So that's all for this episode of Design for Advantage with Rafael. We've explored how the Trophy APS is changing the survivability equation on the battlefield, not just by protecting platforms, but by enabling faster, smarter, and more confident operations. Thanks to Gideon Weiss and Col B for sharing their insights. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Tony. Been a pleasure.
Thank you for having us, Tony.
If you missed previous episodes, be sure to head to our Design for Advantage content hub at shepherdmedia.com. We'll leave a link in the show notes. That's where you can access all your earlier podcast episodes and lots of supporting material. Until next time, thanks for listening.